Man, oh man, it's really, really, really blowing out there today. Welcome to the superpilotish channel. My name's Graham Wilson, and today I'm going to be talking about windy tips in my basement. And it is really windy out there today. I didn't have too much of a I don't know idea of what to talk about today, and then I looked out the window and I could see all the trees going all over the place. So it's pretty crazy. And just a little while ago, DH Pilot One, yes, gusting to 46 knots. I was looking at the local weather. Environment Canada was saying 100 kilometers. It was gusting to 100 kilometers an hour. And I also checked the pilot weather stuff. And as of an hour ago, it reported gusting 54 knots. So it was 30 gusting 54 knots. So pretty windy. So there we go. There's my topic for today. And I was gonna do something like 5 tips or whatever, but I'm gonna go with I jotted a few things down, and I don't know, maybe other tips will come to mind. So there'll be some tips today about flying, and we'll say windy tips on the whiteboard. Here we go. Windy tips. Okay, and we'll underline that in blue. Awesome marker. Now which end does that go on? Okay, that was blue. And that's black. Okay. So number one, just like I was talking about, a little handy. There's all these little rules of thumb when it comes to flying an airplane, just like any other job or any other profession that you do. And one of the things that I found out is that just roughly, a rule of thumb is that whatever you see on, say, you're getting from the TV, the news in Canada, it reports the wind speeds in kilometers per hour. So basically, if you are kilometers per hour, yeah. So if you got kilometers per hour, and that's for your wind speed, kilometers per hour, and we'll say there's like it was reporting today, 100 kilometers an hour, and you chop that in half, and then when you want it in knots, just chop it in half, and there you go. You got knots. Same thing goes if it's reporting 50 knots. It's about 100 kilometers an hour. Kind of a rough rule of thumb. And then another thing, if you're coming into land, how much crosswind do you have? Now, there's this thing on airplanes that they call the maximum demonstrated crosswind, and basically for any little airplane that I've ever flown, it's the maximum amount of crosswind that you can have when you're landing, and you still have rudder authority. So you usually, if you're up over and this is at the regular stalling speed. So let's use the KD12X. I wasn't sure which one to use today for my props, but we'll use this one because it's got a nice big rudder on it. And yeah, so when you're coming into land, okay, you're gonna be applying your crosswind. We'll say the wind's coming from this way. Your crosswind technique of banking it that way. Oh, but then it wants to turn. So you counteract that with some right rudder out here, and that'll just keep you kind of coming in straight. But you will be tilted over on the side, but that's okay. And yeah, so on most little airplanes, it's right around 15 knots, could be 17, could be 10, depending on ultralights are actually pretty bad on that. They usually have they run out of rudder at about 10. So yeah, generally, if you got full flap and you got your Cessna 172 at a direct 15 knot crosswind, you got your full rudder in there, and you can still keep it on the center line. Over that, you're going to kind of get blown over, and your foot will be right on the ground or right to the floor. You run out of rudder. So there we go. So you're going to have to know what is your crosswind component. And the way I always figure it is, oh, I need another whiteboard. I just happen to have another whiteboard. I was wondering if I was going to need this, the emergency red one. So if you have a runway I don't think I've ever used this one before. So there's your attractive runway. And we'll say the wind is coming this way. Wind. Yeah, I don't even know how this thing erases or anything. And we'll say it's 30 degrees off your nose when you're coming into land. Okay, so here you are. This is your airplane. You're coming into land and you take a look at the windsock and it looks like that. Okay, here you go. You look at the windsock, you know that it's about 30 degrees off, and we'll say the windsock is sticking out uh, at where you could tell it's 10 knots. Okay, we'll say the wind is 10 knots. You can tell that on the windsock pretty easily. And you go, oh, okay, well, how much crosswind do I have here now? Now, if it's about 30 degrees off, you just chop it in half. So, and then you got, so you're going to have a 5 knot, 5 knot. There you go. You got your 5 knot crosswind component. Jeez, what was that? Stuff's blowing around outside here. It sounded like something banged up against the window. Oh, some junk blowing around. There we go. 5 knot crosswind. So 10 knots. If it's 30 degrees off the nose, chop it in half. So, hey, there's another neat little whiteboard. Might have to do that again. So number 2, if it is, we'll say wind 30 degrees off of nose, and then we'll say crosswind component is half of wind speed. Okay. Ta-da. There's the other one. So if the wind is 30 degrees off the nose of the airplane, the crosswind is half of the wind speed. Okay, another little thing to think about when it's all gusty. Still wondering what blew around out there beside my house. Okay. And yeah, what else we got here? We'll say another thing to worry about if it's really gusty like this. Do you know VA, your maneuvering speed? And the maneuvering speed, I'm going to explain that. I never really knew what it was too much, but it's basically the speed at which you can fly your plane. It's usually a little bit slower than it's slower than the maximum speed you could possibly go. Let's use the KD-12X Mark II here again. And yeah, so your maneuvering speed, if you don't know what that is, and if you're what else we got here? If you're just a passenger on a jet, just relax because your pilots know this stuff. So if it is all windy and gusty, all the stuff I'm saying here, the captain and the co-pilot up in the front, they know all about this stuff, and they simulate it too. So yeah, VA is the point at which you're getting bounced all around like this, and so the maneuvering speed is the speed where say you got full deflection of your elevator here, you're pulling all the way back, and then that's the speed at which the plane will stall, and then anything over that, or like talking about your wing mostly, your wing will stall, but anything over that, that's where you're increasing your chances of the wing actually breaking or bending. So that's the way I remember the maneuvering speed, and that's also with neutral ailerons. So any type of twisting that you're putting on, your wing, that will increase the chances of it bending. All the testing is done kind of, I guess, statically with just a straight wing like this with no twisting forces on it. If you get into jets and stuff like that, like fighter jets, and they will have limitations on how much bank you can do when you're doing that kind of stuff. So, okay, don't forget your maneuvering speed. Another little thing, if you have an engine failure and you want to stretch your glide. Now, if you do that, if you manage to do this on your flight test, it's very impressive. Because usually when you're simulating a forced approach, where forced approach is what we say instead of engine failure, and then because you're getting forced to go to the ground, so um, yeah, you're going to. All right. So if we have, here we go. We have, say, like there's a really strong wind, like today, and it's gusting to 50 knots, but let's just say you have your plane, and if you're gliding down here, we'll say you're going 70 knots. Ho, 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 everything's cool. But what if you come in, if you had an exact 70 knot wind coming onto your nose, what would happen? Okay, your airspeed says, here I am, I'm going at 70 knots, or maybe there's some sort of wind shear, and you're coming along like this. Oh, now you've encountered a 70 knot headwind. Well, you got 70 knots here, 70 knots here. So what you're going to do is basically just kind of go down like that, and you won't get any further. So what you can do is if you increase your airspeed a little bit, say you're going 75 knots, now you're going forward at 5 knots. And that'll be able to stretch your glide from 0 to a little bit more. And so if you're gliding into the wind at any speed, if you want to stretch out your glide a little bit, just increase your gliding speed by about 5 knots or so. And hey, Shecky's having a good time. Ooh. All right. Yeah. So the other thing I was going to say, if it's windy, don't be afraid to increase airspeed to stretch your glide. Okay, here we go. Whoop, not glide. Let's see if I can erase this. Always got to have the handy paper towels around in the workshop. And okay, stretch the glide. Oh, while I'm at it, I should erase this one here too. See how the backup whiteboard's doing. Yeah, that's another thing about whiteboards. If you haven't used them too much, is that you gotta take the marker off right away. Otherwise, if you let it sit there for a while, it can just kind of leave an image of it. They call it ghosting. Different type of ghosting than all the kids are used to these days. Okay, glide. Okay, you can always increase your airspeed just a little bit, about 5 knots, to stretch your glide. Hey, we're up to tip number 5. 5. Okay, here's another thing. If it is super gusty and you have a plane with an autopilot, do not use your autopilot. Okay, let's try this one here. If it's super gusty, no autopilot. Now you might be thinking, well, why not? The the robot flies the plane better than I do. Yes, it does when it's nice and smooth. But if you've ever flown a plane with an autopilot, you'll know that the altitude is maintained by, basically it's a mechanism of the trim wheel, and so this little guy back here will tilt. You know, if it's the whole thing, it'll tilt up and down just a little bit to change your pitch, so you'll be going up or down. And actually, if you didn't know about it, if you're even on an airliner, if you're going, like, say you're at the front here, and the flight attendants are taking the drink cart and they're going from the front, oh, let's go to the back now. Mm-hmm. When they go to the back, the airplane is actually going to be adjusting the trim. So the pilots will be sitting in the front. Say there was a whole bunch of everyone decided to go back to the bathroom at the same time, and everyone's sitting back at the tail. The pilots would notice the trim wheel moving, and it's like, what's going on? And it would be kind of going like this. So, but it will still maintain the altitude. But you can't if it's really gusty and you're going up and down. Oh, hey, safety dog's in here too. Hey, David. And yeah, so if you got the if the autopilot is on, it might not be, and say you want to maintain a constant altitude, The autopilot with the elevator here, it's kind of slow and refined. So as it's coming down, it'll want to kind of pitch up, but it won't be able to do it fast enough. The same thing if you're coming up like this, it would want to go down, but it won't do it fast enough. So what you can do is yeah, so if you are flying the plane, and it's all over the place, just as they say, ride the waves. Okay, here we go, and do your best. At that point, you will be better than the autopilot for maintaining your altitude. And also, if it's a bigger airplane, the ailerons might not be as responsive for bank, and you'll be able to crank it over a little bit better. Another thing there too is that if you have your autopilot, if it's a really gusty, the autopilot will kick off, and then usually there's an audible warning beep. It's super loud. It'll wake you up if you're falling asleep. And so here the dozing off and up in the cockpit, and then beep. Whoa. Okay. If you now the thing is about that is that the if it's bouncing around too much and the autopilot kicks off and there's a big beep to wake up the pilots, it's what if that audible warning is not serviceable, or you tested it on the ground, you're flying around, something happened and it's just broke. So now you think it's the autopilot's doing its thing, and it kicked off, and nobody's doing their thing. So that's one of the biggest problems about airline. Even airliner, accidents is that a lot of times there's nobody flying the plane. Oh, I thought he was flying it. Oh, I thought he was flying it. Oh, I thought the autopilot was flying it, and nobody was flying it. Or they get distracted with going down a checklist, and they're not flying the plane and watching the airspeed go down. So that's something to a couple reasons why you don't want to be flying around in gusty weather with your autopilot on. Another little thing here. Number 6, we're getting up to 6. Do I have 7? Maybe. If you're going to come in and land and it's really gusty like it is outside right now, you would want to increase your approach speed a little bit. So generally what they say is half the gust factor. Half gust factor. So like I was saying before here, the when I checked the weather, it was 30 knots, and so that's your minimum. And every once in a while, it'll gust up to 54 knots. So half of the gust factor there on approach. Okay, here we go. Half your gust factor on approach. So what that happens is, and especially like it's crazy windy out there right now. So the difference between 54 knots and 30 knots is 24 knots. So you would increase your approach speed by 12. So that's your half of your gust factor. The gust factor is the difference between your maximum gust and your baseline airspeed, we'll say. And so what else we got here? Yeah, and then if there's a crosswind, I was actually looking around. I did a little bit of research on this on the internet, and I've always increased if there's a really nasty crosswind, I'll increase my approach speed a little bit. But just looking on the internet, I don't really see anyone doing that. But it would make sense if, like I was talking about before, if you're coming into land like this and you're running out of rudder, if you increase your approach speed, the rudder will become more effective and it'll keep you straight going down the runway. So you could do that. Use your best judgment. It's all rule of thumb, anyways. So increase your approach speed, half of the gust factor, and even tack on a few extra knots if it's a really really big crosswind. Oh, and then why would you want to increase your speed? Okay, let's do a big exaggeration here. So let's just say the difference between your baseline. This is really, I know that'd be okay. Basically, we'll say the difference between you flying at an approach speed of 70 knots. Here I am, I'm landing 70 knots, ho, ho, ho. And then all of a sudden, that was a 70 knot gust, and it goes down to 40 knots as your headwind here now. Whoop! Now your plane doesn't have enough air to fly, and boom, down you go. Or you'll be doing a stall recovery, and you don't want to be doing that at low airspeed. So that's why you would do that. And another thing too, last little one that I was thinking about that a lot of new pilots have a problem with is oh, I just ran out. That's good. Sometimes when you're learning how to fly, you have to make the plane not fly, and that's by practicing what happens if your wing stops flying by calling that a wing stall. And you also have to get used to flying sideways. Flying sideways is the way that you are supposed to fly sometimes. If you were to be, and you'll notice this if you're flying even as a passenger on a jet. Okay, here we go. Let's use the original KD-12X for this one because it's a little. See, there's no propeller, so it's a jet. But actually, the other one doesn't have a propeller either. That's a tail dragger now. So this is the this guy forgot to put his landing gear down. So, anyways, here we are. We're coming in our jet, but we have a big, strong crosswind. There's always a crosswind this way, right? Just because it's harder for me to go crosswind that way. But okay, crosswind's going this way. In order to track, this is our runway here. This little board I found in the garbage and turned it into a bench. So the wind's coming this way. So if the pilot isn't turning into the wind a bit, it'll just kind of get blown sideways with our wind. So the pilot will be coming in a little bit sideways like this, but we'll be tracking straight down the runway or on approach to it. So if you're sitting in the back over here in the nice safe space, your happy safe space on your jet, statistically where you're the most survivable. So if you're sitting in the back here on your jet, you could be looking out your window. You're not looking over this way. You're looking down the runway. You're like, hey, why are we going sideways? Because sometimes you're supposed to fly sideways. And then what will happen if it's a really nasty crosswind? They'll come down here and then they'll just kind of kick it straight at the end and then they land. So that's the way they do it. So there we go. A few little tips here. And then before I go through, if there's any questions or anything like that. So 7 windy tips. There we go. I didn't know what to title this. So I put X windy tips. And I thought more would come to mind, but that's all that came to mind was 7. So here we go. Just to recap. The little tip, easy, quickie conversion. If you see and like this could be if you're at like a little airport and they don't have actual airport weather reporting, but they do have the weather channel says, hey, the wind is southeast at 100 kilometers an hour. You'll know that it's actually a 50 knot wind. And then you stay in your hotel room and watch cable TV because you're not flying that day. It's pretty nasty in a little plane. Big planes can handle some pretty good winds. Okay. Yeah, just before coming here was the 757 I found out has a 40 knot crosswind limitation. That's pretty heavy duty. Okay, so if the wind is 30 degrees off your nose, your crosswind component will be half of your wind speed. Make sure you know what your maneuvering speed is. That's the speed at which that speed and below your wing will stall instead of brake with full elevator input. Number 4, increase your airspeed to stretch your glide. If you have a forced approach, that works in any condition, but it's really noticeable if it's really windy out. If it's gusty, don't be shy about turning off the autopilot. And what do we got here? Well, there's a whole bunch of tips. Half of the gust factor on approach. Yeah, if you're going to be approaching and it's gusty, or even like a little bit of a crosswind, you can speed things up a bit. And don't be afraid about flying sideways, even if you're a passenger. There's your 7. Okay, 7. What is that? 7. I don't know. There we go. 7 and I don't know. 7. Okay, tips for flying around if it's windy. So here we go. And I'll just kind of go through our, see if there's any little questions here. And okay, so DH Pilot 1 was wondering before if there was a cat getting blown into my window. Might have been a cat. I don't know. Probably sounded, I don't know. I got to go check it out afterwards. And where are we here? Okay. And then Shecky's always standing in the back of the plane because that's where the goodies are. That's right. Yeah, sure. Could I have some more cookies? Yeah, thanks. All right. So, all right, here. What if it's a one-axis autopilot that maintains heading only? Oh, you know what? Pilots are always the best. It's just like, what if? Okay, I thought of all the possibilities. Then a pilot shows up and says, "Oh yeah, what about this?" And then the next pilot will go, "Well, that doesn't apply to me. What about this?" It just happens all the time. So, anyways, the okay, if there is a one-axis autopilot that only flies the heading, let me see here. I don't really know too much of them. Usually, if it's a one-axis it'd be a two-axis autopilot for your pitch. 3-axis, yeah. Good question. I would say same thing because I've never actually heard of. Yeah, actually, you know what? Yeah, it would be a heading thing. So, yeah, same deal there. Because now I'm sure anytime I've been in a plane that actually has roll control like that to maintain your heading, that would be yeah. So your ailerons are usually pretty effective on that. They're a little bit better than your elevator to maintain your altitude. So they're pretty good, but if it's really gusty, you don't want I wouldn't want to be banking over way too much. And then, yeah, I think my reflexes would probably be faster than the autopilots. So, and you might even be able to kind of smooth that out a bit because there'd be a little bit of a lag between when the autopilot senses, okay, it's moving, make the counter action. You would be faster than the autopilot detecting that and correcting it. I'm pretty sure. So, anyways, oh, Wrench is here. Cool. Hey, Wrench. And yes, flying alone on windy days. Yeah, Wrench is a private pilot. And yeah, it's if you are on a windy day, don't take anybody up as passengers unless they're pilots. They're going to get sick. I can make that 8. No passengers. Well, unless it's your job, then you have to. But make sure they have some sick bags with them. And yeah, you don't want to scare people that are apprehensive about flying and they're not like really into it. You can really scare them on bumpy days, and you you don't want to make their apprehension into fear. So that's a good point there, Wrench. And okay, that's cool. Today is Wednesday. All right. So it looks like I managed to find something to talk about today. And I gotta do laundry too. It's like I got this. I'm down to my like ancient sweaters that I don't know how old this is. You're getting old when you go like, I have no idea when I got that sweater. It was like, what is it, 15 years old now and stuff. I got shoes older than you, kid. So yeah, that'll happen when you get a little bit of gray hair. So yes. So anyways, yeah, so I got to do laundry today, and then it'll be Friday that you see me next, because I do this Monday, Wednesday, Friday at noon Eastern, and we'll just kind of shut her down here. Very cool. All right. Thank you for watching. Bye.